Wow, that was incredible. Thank you, thank you. Because doesn't that just go along with what we've been talking about? We've been talking about living in an opulent world or an opulent universe. And you know, my spirit sings to me, how great thou art. You know, it's like there's just so much to be thankful for, so much diversity and incredible magnificence. Last week, I used the word sumptuous. It's the sumptuousness, or the razzmatazz, or razzle-dazzle of this expression, this divine expression. And so last week we really talked about this creative expression that has been created. I mean, it is just this incredible thing. Did any of you do the assignment of walking around and paying attention to how much diversity and how much beauty is actually out there? You know, it is just amazing when you start to look. It's like, oh my gosh, that little bug looks different than that little bug. You know, I mean, it's just amazing. And so I'm going to talk about the first book of Genesis a little bit today. And in the first book of Genesis, God creates. In the first 5 days, God creates the heavens and the earth. And he creates all that is within it. And it's like each day he creates something new. And as this creation continues to happen, as Spirit continues to create, every time what is said is, and it is good. And it is good. And so if we look at all of creation, do we look at all of creation and go, it is good? You know, I bet there's a few things out there that you look at and go, except that. Right now I'm thinking of scorpions. You know, it's like everything's good, but they kind of give me the heebie-jeebies. So, and yes, we actually have scorpions in Prescott. But the divine said, it is good. It is good. And then on the sixth day was a very special day. Because on the sixth day, God spoke its name. And you and I were created. Humankind came in to being. Made in the image and likeness of the divine. No other creature does the divine say, I made this creature in my image and likeness, except for humankind. And Spirit breathed the breath of life into us. And so every time we take that breath, every time that we breathe, we are breathing Spirit. We are breathing that life essence. It's really kind of powerful to think that every time that we breathe, we are breathing God. And it's even more powerful to think that when God spoke its name, we came into existence. So metaphysically, to speak the name of something is to speak its nature. And so within each of us is the nature of God. That is our true self. That is our true self. And over many millennias, many millennias, we have built up a protective structure, shall I say, which we have named the ego. And this structure is meant to protect us. I'm not really sure what from at this point, but it is meant to protect us. That's what it was, that's what we created it for. And sometimes we talk about the ego as if the ego is a separate entity. Right? It's like the devil that's on this shoulder and the angel is on this shoulder, and they're two separate entities here. But the ego is actually a part of us. The challenge comes when the ego decides to get in the front seat and drive the bus. Right? I mean, isn't that where some of our challenges come in and some of our suffering comes in? Is the ego gets in the front seat and wants to take us where it wants to go. And wherever it wants to go, it has been driven not by love, but by fear. Because that's what activates that energy within us. What activates that energy within us is when we become afraid. And so how do we move from being afraid to recognizing our opulence? There's another word that I came up with in thinking about a description of humankind, and that is that we are audacious. Now, that's another one of those words that people can look at it two ways. You look at somebody and say, wow, they're really audacious, kind of like they're too full of themselves. But the way that I'm looking at it from a spiritual standpoint is I can't be too full of myself. I can only be myself. And so in that audacity, we take on the remembrance of the truth of who we are. That we are love in expression. That we are the opulence of the universe in expression. Last week, I used a quote by Eric Butterworth that says, I am an opulent expression of the divine. I am an opulent expression of the divine. Everything that I need is supplied. I'm an opulent expression. And so as we own that, as we remember that, then we step into higher levels of consciousness to where things begin to flow differently than they have, maybe in the past. So I'm not sure exactly who came up with this, but the first person that I heard to come up with it was Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith. And what I'm speaking about is the 4 stages of consciousness. Now, the first time I heard about the 4 stages of consciousness, it was like my mind immediately went to, I got to be the best, right? Isn't that what we think? It's like, stage 1, not for me. I got to be a 4, just because I got to be the best. But these stages are not stages like a ladder. They're more spiralish. They just keep going around. And we enter into each of these stages multiple times a day. So it's not like we go, oh, this is the stage I'm at. Because about the time I do that, I kind of get a little puffy and go, this is the stage I'm at. Something happens and I go, boom. I forget who I am. So the stages are victim, metaphysician, mystic, and master. Doesn't that sound kind of like a hierarchy tier thing? No, it's not. Because the victim stage is that to me stage. You know, we've all been there. Life is happening to me, and it's them out there that are doing it, or that circumstance is doing it, or something is doing it to me. And sometimes in that stage, it's real easy to get into the little pity party. Yeah, woe is me. Little Eeyore, you know, Eeyore walked around all the time going, woe is me. It's always bad. But then we wake up a little bit and we move into the metaphysician stage, and the metaphysician stage is by me. Now, what I love to call this stage is the 3-year-old stage, and you may be able to relate to this. Ask any 3-year-old to put their shoes, to get their shoes so you can put their shoes on, because you're in a hurry. I do it myself. Okay, do it myself. No, I do it myself. That's the spiritual stage, actually. And it's a stage where we realize that we have the power to create our experience. Now, you're going to recognize that I said our experience, I didn't say our circumstances. Because we create our experience by the thoughts that we hold about the circumstances. So it's in that stage that we first begin to explore our spiritual power and recognize that we're not a victim. We're not walking around at the whim of whatever comes along, but that we do have spiritual power to be able to create, to co-create whatever it is that is going on. So then the next stage is the mystic stage. And the mystic stage is through me. And that's when we recognize that it's not about me do it myself. It's about working in partnership with God. It's about being in a partnership and allowing that inspiration to come through that inspires us, and we take action from that inspiration. It is in that stage that we really begin to activate the powers within us, the power of imagination, knowing that that power of imagination is the power of the divine revealing something new to us. And so we begin to be conscious that Spirit is working through us. The next stage is the stage of master, what they call master. And in the master stage, it is as me. And so this is where we recognize, we have those moments where we recognize that the divine and I are one. Just as Jesus said, the Father and I are one. Jesus said, the Father is in me and I am in you. It was like this whole circular thing of everybody is in everybody. And so it is this place of oneness. It is the beginning stage of seeing our oneness. And it's, I am in this oneness in the divine. Now you're going to notice, maybe, that all four of these stages are about me. All about me. You guys are on your own, okay? Just saying. It's all about me. So there's a few of us who were having a conversation, and out of this conversation came the idea that there's another level. And another level is we. It is the stage of we. It is a stage where we recognize that I cannot be one in and of myself. It takes all of us to be one. Now, does that mean that we're all the same? No. How boring would that be? I mean, we just looked at the diversity and the opulence of the creation of plants and animals. Think about that in terms of people and the opulence of the expression of the people around us. The gifts that we can bring to each other. The gifts that can sustain us and sustain each other. Every thought that we hold in mind affects the whole. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the other person is. The thoughts that we hold affect the whole. And so when we hold thoughts of love and understanding and compassion, that affects the whole. And when we hold other thoughts, that also affects the whole. And it affects the whole in miraculous ways. So I'm going to end by telling you a story. This is actually a prayer story, but it's kind of like one of my favorite stories. There's a missionary. I may have actually told this story here before, but there's a missionary, and the missionary is he has come back to the United States because they have to do that yearly to kind of check in with their ministries that is supporting them, and in order to let them know what they've been doing and all of that. So the missionary is standing there, and he's telling the congregation all about his experiences and what he's been doing over in Africa, the other side of the planet. And he tells this story about it takes 3 days for him to go to town to get medicine. And so on this one particular trip, he walks in and, he walks the day and a half in to go to town. He comes out of the bank with the money to go to the pharmacy and get the medicine. And there are these two men out in the street that they're going at it. And he walks up to them and he goes, brothers, please, brothers, we are meant to love each other. And he talks to them for a little while, and they calm down, and he goes about his business and goes off to the pharmacy and gets the medicine and goes back out to where he had his camp. And the next morning he wakes up, and these two men who had been fighting came up to him and said, "Where are they?" And he's like, "Who's who? Where are they?" And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm the only one who's been here all night." And he said, "You saw me in town. I was alone. I'm alone." And they said, No, you're not alone." And they didn't say you weren't alone. They said, "No, you're not alone." And they said, "We came out here last night to kill you and to rob you." And there were 12 men circling your camp. So he thinks he's done with his story, about how miraculous it was that God had protected him. One of the men in the congregation kind of raises his hand and goes, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you tell me when this was?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I can tell you exactly when it was." And he tells him, and he says, "Do you mind if I finish the story?" Well, that really takes the missionary back. It's like, okay. And he says, "On that day, I was mowing my lawn, because it's the other side of the world. So morning here, night there. I'm mowing my lawn, and I got this urge that we needed to pray for you and pray for you right now. So I got on the phone, and I called all the men and said, anybody who's available, come and let's pray for the missionary. For whatever reason, I just feel like he really needs prayer right now. So let's pray." So they come together and they pray. And he said, "Would all the men who joined me that morning please stand up?" And 11 other men stood up in the congregation. To me, that is such a powerful example of how we can make a difference in people's lives, even when we don't even know what's going on. And here's a little clue. You never really know what's going on in somebody else's life. But how often do we get that nudge? How often do we get that nudge to call someone, and we make excuses in our own mind as to why we can't make that phone call? What is it about the phone that it weighs so much? We don't have any problems picking it up to play a game or check our email. But to pick it up and to make a connection with someone else, to be that in someone else's life, that is part of that we consciousness. It's taking us out of, it's about me, to it is about all of us. It is about the care of all of us, of recognizing the opulence, the sumptuousness, the razzle-dazzle of every person that we know. And so this week, the invitation is, excuse me, the invitation is to pick up the telephone. Sit down and write somebody an old-fashioned snail mail letter. Do you know what that would do to their heart if they went to the mailbox and there was actually a handwritten letter in the mailbox? Do something for someone else. Just because, just because you can. And see how that opens you up to a brighter, more opulent experience of each other. God bless.